Today we have this 2010 Toyota Prius. This is a Gen 3 Prius, and it's a pretty much a base model here. But we are going to do a rear brake job on this car. Now, for the most part, this rear brake job is going to go just like any other brake job that we do. However, we do have a couple of little things that we have to do before we get started. First thing we have to do on this vehicle is go ahead and disconnect the 12-volt battery, and if you want to, the high voltage battery as well. So disconnect the 12-volt battery in the trunk and pull your plug out to make sure that the brake system does not activate when we're in the middle of doing this brake job, okay? This car can activate its brake system whenever it wants to. So if you open the door, I know sometimes you hear like a hum noise when you open the door. A lot of that times that comes from the pump actually applying pressure to the brake system to make sure it has the correct pressure before you get in the car and drive. So this brake job does take a couple of special tools. It's really not anything out of the ordinary. And I'm going to show you how to backflush the brake caliper to get all the old sediment and any moisture and anything out of the brake system. Because most of these cars, when they get brake jobs like this one, has almost 200,000 miles on it. So this vehicle has been traveling for 10 years, 200,000 miles without anything done to the brakes. So there is a problem sometimes when you push this caliper back in, which I'll show you how to do that with a special tool, that you can stir up some sediment and send that up through the system back into the accumulator and the brake booster module, which I have a video on how to replace that, because I think that's what's happened on this car. It got some front brakes about 2 weeks before it started developing brake issues, and I think what happened is we had some sediment that was hung up in the accumulator valves that may have caused a failure of the unit. So I'm gonna show you guys how to do that. Only thing you're gonna need is these special tools. I'm gonna go over what they are. You can get them from Harbor Freight or any of your auto parts stores that rent tools normally is going to rent the rear brake tools. And you're going to need some brake fluid, of course, brake pads, and possibly rotors or some way to refinish these rotors. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to show you how to inspect the brakes and then move forward with replacing the rear pads. Okay, so first thing I want to do, this is just an extra step that I do. You don't have to do this, but I just want to make sure that this car gets put back together exactly how it's supposed to. And there are times when hub runout is kind of matched with the rotor. So if I'm going to take this rotor off, I want to put it back exactly how it came off, even if I've already cut it. Now, if you're replacing the rotors on this, this is a step you don't have to take. But if you're just taking these off and go getting them turned somewhere, or you have a brake lathe in your shop and you're ready to turn, then this is a step you want to take. So what I do is I normally take a marker and just color a stud here, and then I put a mark right here. And that way, when I put this rotor back on, it's going to go on at the direct clocking that it came off of, okay? That's just a pro tip that I use. You don't have to do that. But it's pretty easy, right? Okay, so next thing we have to do is we have to get the caliper off here and get the brake pads out. That way we can measure this rotor and make sure it is still a good rotor and we can turn it and go about our business. Okay, so you have two bolts right here. They are 14 millimeters, and we are going to want to go ahead and take those off. Now, if you take these off and this starts spinning in here, this part where the boot is, you can put a open-end wrench right here to hold that still. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, just very dependent on what type of car you have. Get that out of the way here. Go ahead and take the other one off. Shouldn't be that tight. All right, now that we have that done, we can go ahead and pull this off to the side. Just lay it down. You really don't have to tie this up. It's not very heavy, so it's not going to stretch on that brake line or anything like that. So now we have to remove the brake pads. So you'll see these two little clips right here, and these are anti-rattle clips, and we're going to go ahead and take these off. they just go, they kind of squeeze in and they go into the hole back here. You want to keep all your hardware and make sure that your new pads come with new hardware, and if they don't, I guess you'll just have to reuse the old hardware. Put these off to the side. Go ahead and pull these brake pads out. You also want to remember where they go, okay? Some of these brake pads are proprietary to each side. Pull this one out. And now we have full access to that rotor here to where we can measure and make sure that we have enough meat to turn, or if we need to go ahead and replace this rotor. Okay, so my specification on this is going to be 9 to 7.5 millimeters is where this rotor should fall into specification. If it is lower than 7.5 millimeters, this rotor is not able to be cut. You need to go ahead and throw it in the trash and get some new rotors. So I have my digital micrometer here and or caliper, and I'm just going to go in here. What you want to do is you want to measure. So that's 8.5. You want to measure 854, 855, and you just turn the rotor. Just measure 3 places, about 3 different radiuses on the rotor. See, this is 8.46, 8.5. I'm going to turn it around and just kind of see where you're at. 8.4, 8.6, 8.5. Okay, so this is a rotor that can be machined. You want to take your lowest number. Okay, so if you have anything lower than 7.5 on anywhere on here, you're going to need to replace your rotor. Okay, we also replace rotors in pairs. So you want to do the left and the right rear rotor if any of these are not in specification. Also, if there's very, scoring or gouges, or if the rotor looks purple in some places where it's been overheated, that's definitely something we want to replace. Check for cracks, anything like that, anything that you can see that may, tell us that we're going to need another rotor. So this rotor seems to be okay. So I need to take this bracket off right here so we can remachine this rotor. Okay, and so we have, looks like more 14 millimeters down here. They're not that tight. So when we get these off, we can machine them, or we can replace them or take them somewhere and get them machined. Whatever your options are. I have an on-car brake lathe, so that's what I'm going to use. And we're going to make sure that this rotor is machined to perfection. Now, after you machine the rotor, you need to measure it again and make sure it's not under that 7.5 millimeters. If it is, it's just time for new rotors. Okay, drop the bolt there. I'll take this bracket off and I'm going to show you what we're going to do with it. All right, so I could not get our on-car brake lathe, the adapter to fit on this car properly. So I'm going to go ahead and put this on our bench lathe and get it turning. You can see right here how kind of out around it is. The silver part you see is the new machining, and of course the other part is the old stuff. So we're just going to do a couple of cuts on this, do a finish cut. Let's go ahead and move on to the rest of the job while this is going. Okay, while our brake rotor's turning, I'm gonna go ahead and get these pads prepared for installation. So I've got our caliper bracket here. One of the things I want to do is I'm going to go ahead, since this has got a lot of miles on it, go ahead and just pull these out. You'll notice that it has some pretty gnarly grease on it. So you can just wipe this off, even maybe use some brake cleaner or something like that. Just go ahead and get these cleaned up. because you don't want these to seize up. It can cause a brake pull or uneven pad wear. Also want to go ahead and take this hardware off. Probably gonna need a screwdriver. So it should just kind of pop off here. Definitely stake down in there. And so you see these are pretty well worn. The shiny marks right there are where the pad lays. Just want to take your new hardware, lay it back down in there. Make sure you get it centered up. Reason why, if it's off center, it can very well cause noise because it can scrub up against the brake rotor. You're going to push this back down in there. There we go. You may have to get a little nasty with it. And do both sides. You also, I have this stuff right here. It is the silicone brake lubricant, and AC Delco makes this, but a lot of people do. And this right here is what I use to lubricate these brake pads and the pins. So you want to take these on your pins, you want to put that, this is a high temperature lubricant. So anti-seize works very well. If you have anti-seize for spark plugs, it works as well. Just want to brush that on these parts. Make sure that the boots to the caliper are in good condition. Just slide these back in there. You should slide right back into the boots. And this will keep that from binding up. But if these are binding up, you need to take them out, take a wire brush to them, or in some cases even replace this bracket if they're bound up too hard. Now on the brake pads, you have two different brake pads. You have one with this tang on it right here, and this is what makes the squeal noise when your brake pads are going low. So you want to make sure you put that on the correct side. I believe it goes on the inside. And I also lubricate the pads. So you want to put a little lubricant on everywhere that the metal touches the metal on these. Don't put any lubricant on the actual material, on the brake pad material, okay? But just where the caliper is going to touch the brake pad or the caliper bracket, I put a little bit of that on there. And what that's going to do is going to keep any vibration, noise down. It's almost like nails on a chalkboard. You want to do all four pads this way. And that will make sure that we're not developing any of that nail on the chalkboard squeak that you'll get out of some brake jobs. This is a step a lot of people skip. You skip it, that's your business, but there's not a car that I work on, brakes-wise, that doesn't get this treatment. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and prepare the hardware. Looks like the brake rotor is finished turning, and we'll go back to reassembly. Okay, so I discussed that you're gonna need some special tools, and I have 3 different options for you as far as special tools go. This is the grandfather of them all. This is a Sir Tools brake compression kit here, and it is air powered. So if you got a hung caliper or something like that, and you twist this thing in, and you press this button right here, and it just sends the caliper right where it needs to go, the caliper piston, and it has all the different adapters for all kinds of different calipers. This set right here is just a Blue Point It reminds me a lot of the set that Harbor Freight sells. It's basic. When you're screwing this in, you also tighten this right here, and it basically pushes the piston back. It's pretty much, you know, foolproof here, and it has the different adapters as well. And then you have this right here. This is a tool you put on a ratchet, and you line up these with whatever caliper cup that you have, and you're twisting that caliper in. So on these calipers right here, you can't just use like a C-clamp or something like that to get them back in. They have to actually twist in because of the design of the emergency brake. So you have to use one of these 3 sets. This is like $7, $8. This is probably through Harbor Freight, $30 or $40, and this has come down a lot. If you do a lot of rear brakes, I definitely recommend this. I bought this, about 15 years ago, and it has performed beautifully. There's not a caliper out there that I've had problems with using this setup right here. But again, it's cost, it's expensive. I don't expect anybody to go out and just run and buy these sets. You can get it done with this. It's just a little bit more aggravating. So let's go over to the car and I'll show you how to put it back together. Okay, before assembly, we need to press the caliper back, the bore of the caliper back in. So I'm gonna show you guys how to back flush, and this is so you can remove anything that's trapped in the caliper, grease, dirt, oil, whatever. So what we'll do is we'll take our Tools tool here. I have the 4-pin tool here, and we're going to put this in the bore and get it situated in there. And then what we're going to do is loosen the bleeder. It's a 10 millimeter. Take your dust cap off your bleeder. I have a little rubber cap on it right here. And we're going to loosen the bleeder. Now, as a caution, you need to only do one side, one caliper at a time like this. The other caliper still needs to be, already on there. It doesn't need to be hanging off like this one is. So I recommend doing this just one side at a time. Okay? We're going to loosen the bleeder. You're going to need to have a pan or something to catch this fluid, which I do. Just can't see it's out of frame. And then we're going to twist this in. And fluid's going to come out. I'm trying to catch it with this pan, but it's... And what that's going to do is it's going to flush all that nasty fluid out of the caliper. Okay? Applying some air pressure with this. It's going to twist that piston right back into the bore. All right, let the pressure off, and that'll be back in there. All we have to do is tighten up the bleeder. There's no way air could have got in here, so we don't need to bleed the brakes out when we're doing this. What that does is it makes sure that no old dirty fluid gets pushed back up into the system and ends up in the accumulator or the brake booster. After you get done with that, go ahead and put your dust cap back on your bleeder and get something to clean up this brake fluid with. Now we'll put the brake rotor back on. And if you remember, I marked it. I marked it here. That way we're putting it exactly where it was. We'll get our caliper bracket. Back on. Just want to hand tighten these for now. The caliper bracket bolt to the axle is going to torque at 42 foot-pounds. So go ahead and grab you a torque wrench and get this torqued. And now we're going to put the brake pads in. Remember the brake pad with the tang? It's going to go on the inside. Like that. Make sure you get it even. You also want to make sure you're not getting any grease or anything on your brake rotors. And if you do, just go ahead and give it a quick blast of cleaner to get that off, brake cleaner. We're going to put our clips back in that we took off right here. They just go in the little drilled holes there. And now we're going to put our caliper back on to finish the job. Slide this on here. Go ahead and just hand tighten the smaller bolts here. And these are going to torque at 25 foot-pounds. So I have to reset my torque wrench. And again, if that inside slide starts to move, you can hold it with an open-end wrench so it doesn't move. So I'm going to reset my torque wrench to 25 foot-pounds. Torque's important on stuff like this. Definitely don't want this coming off on you down the road. So, till it clicks. You want a good sweeping motion. You don't want to jerk this just until it gives way. And I'm just going to take a little bit of brake cleaner here and clean up any fingerprints, any grease marks that you have on the rotor. You definitely want those to be taken care of before you start the burnishing process and getting these brake pads broke in. Okay, so I went ahead and knocked out the other side. I got the wheels back on. I'm gonna drop the car down. The wheels torque at 76 foot-pounds. Just go into a star pattern when you're doing your final torque of the wheel. Also, don't forget to plug your battery and your hybrid battery back in. And as a precaution as well, I was reading in some of the tech tips on this vehicle. I always check TSBs and stuff before I give you guys information, but there is a tech tip in there that this may cause an ABS code to pop up when you first start the vehicle and you start driving. So it's a false code. So what you're going to need to do if that happens is just go ahead and go into the system and delete everything that sets from doing this brake service. It's pretty much a common issue for these vehicles. So that about does it for us today. Again, like the video if it taught you anything. Subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be putting out a lot more hybrid content as my job as automotive instructor. I'm building a hybrid curriculum. So I'm going to be trying to get my hands on every hybrid that I can and start doing more stuff on the Prius. So no telling what you're going to find on the page. Also, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, VK if you're in Europe. And I also have a podcast called Autocorrect with Mr. B that is on Spotify. Check that out. And we'll see you next time.